Texas just hit 30 million people, the fastest growing state, companies relocating by the hundreds, and every governor in America trying to copy the Texas miracle. But the agency that runs the Texas power grid just published something that should terrify every one of those 30 million people. Their own models now show an 80% chance of rolling blackouts in another major storm, which is higher than before 246 people froze to death, despite 4 years of reforms and billions spent. And the grid is not even the worst part. To understand how a state this rich and this powerful ended up here, you have to go back to a decision Texas made in the early 2000s that broke the fundamental contract between growth and infrastructure. The gamble. Nobody questioned. In 2002, Texas completed one of the most aggressive energy deregulations in American history. The state dismantled its old utility model, where a single company generated power, maintained the lines, and served customers in a defined region, and replaced it with a competitive market-based system run by ERCOT. Under the old model, utilities had a legal obligation to keep the lights on. That meant they invested in maintenance, weatherization, and reserve capacity, whether it was profitable or not, because regulators required it. The new model threw all of that out. The pitch was simple and seductive. Competition would drive prices down and innovation up. Let the market decide. And for a while, it worked. Electricity was cheap. Businesses loved it. Politicians bragged about it. But the market had a fatal design flaw. It rewarded companies for selling power, not for maintaining the ability to produce it when conditions turned extreme. Nobody was required to weatherize their equipment. Nobody got paid to keep reserve capacity sitting idle for emergencies. The entire system was optimized for the average day, a Tuesday in April with mild temperatures and steady demand. It completely ignored the worst day. Then, ERCOT made another choice that amplified everything. Texas deliberately isolated its power grid from the rest of the country. The eastern United States runs on one interconnected grid. The western states run on another. Texas runs on its own, an electrical island. The reason was straightforward. Staying disconnected meant avoiding federal regulation. Independence. Self-reliance. The Texas way. But it also meant that when disaster struck, Texas could not borrow power from its neighbors. It could not plug into the national system and draw emergency capacity from states that had electricity to spare. Texas essentially chose to ride out its worst days alone. For 2 decades, nobody questioned it, because the worst day had not arrived yet. Winter Storm Yuri hit Texas on February 15, 2021, and within hours the system designed for average Tuesdays met the furthest thing from an average Tuesday. Temperatures plunged into single digits across the state. Natural gas wellheads froze shut. Pipelines that had never been insulated seized up. Wind turbines iced over and stopped spinning. Coal piles at power plants froze into solid blocks that could not be fed into furnaces. Within the first night, 40% of ERCOT's generating capacity went offline. 4.5 million customers lost power, many for days. Not hours, days. In a state where most homes are built for heat, not cold, where insulation is thin and pipes run through exterior walls because nobody ever expected them to freeze, the consequences were immediate and brutal. Indoor temperatures in some homes dropped below 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Residents burned furniture to stay warm. Families huddled in cars, running the engine for heat until the gas ran out. People wrapped themselves in every piece of clothing they owned and waited in the dark, checking their phones until the batteries died, wondering if anyone was coming. Downtown Houston office towers glowed with power while surrounding neighborhoods sat dark and freezing, a patchwork of haves and have-nots visible from the highway. In San Antonio, grocery stores that still had electricity were mobbed. Shelves emptied within hours. Cities that lost electricity at water treatment plants issued boil water notices, an instruction that requires a working stove, which requires electricity, which nobody had. ERCOT later admitted the entire system came within 4 minutes and 37 seconds of a total grid collapse. Not a blackout that lasts a few hours. A collapse that could have taken weeks to restart, transformer by transformer, substation by substation, in sub-freezing temperatures. Pipes burst in unheated apartment buildings, flooding units and forcing evacuations into snow-covered streets. More than 200 people died. Some froze in their own beds. Others died from carbon monoxide poisoning after running generators or grills indoors out of desperation. The system built for the average day had met its worst day, and it shattered. The fix that made it worse. After Yuri, the response looked serious. Texas passed new laws, introduced weatherization requirements for power plants, and overhauled governance at ERCOT. Billions of dollars were pledged. Leaders stood behind podiums and declared the grid was fixed. The crisis was over. Texas had learned its lesson. But here's what they did not tell you. ERCOT's own updated risk models, published after those reforms were implemented, show that the probability of rolling blackouts in another Uri-scale storm went up, not down. Before 2021, the estimated risk sat at roughly 5%. After 4 years of fixes and billions in investment, it climbed to 80%. The reforms addressed some of the symptoms, with a few more generators weatherized and a few emergency protocols rewritten, but none of the underlying architecture. The market still does not pay for reserve capacity. The grid is still isolated. The fundamental design flaws that caused the collapse are still embedded in the system like cracks in a foundation that somebody painted over instead of repaired. And while politicians were telling Texans the crisis was over, something else was happening that would make the grid problem dramatically worse. The demand. Nobody planned for Texas did not just fail to fix the supply side. It is about to be crushed by the demand side. AI data centers, cryptocurrency mining operations, semiconductor fabrication plants, and electric vehicle battery factories are all racing into Texas, drawn by the same cheap land and light regulation that attracted everyone else. These are not small loads. A single large data center can consume as much electricity as a mid-sized city. Planned data center clusters around San Antonio alone would require 26,000 megawatts, enough electricity to power roughly 6 million homes. ERCOT's projected peak demand is expected to nearly double before the end of the decade and exceed 200 gigawatts. New generation capacity and transmission lines are not being built anywhere close to fast enough to match. The supply gap is not closing, it is accelerating. Texas sold itself as the land of unlimited capacity, a place where you could build anything, power anything, grow anything without limits. Now it is discovering what every boomtown eventually learns. Unlimited growth meets very finite infrastructure. But the grid gets all the headlines, and electricity is just one pipe in a network of systems that are all fraying at the same time. The next one might be even harder to fix because you can build a power plant in a few years, but you cannot manufacture water. The river that's running out. Texas's official state water plan lays out a math problem that does not have a solution yet. Existing water supply is projected to drop 18% by 2070, from 16.8 million acre-feet to 13.8 million, while demand rises 9% over the same period. That gap leaves roughly 1 in 4 Texans facing municipal water shortages during a drought year. Not a hypothetical drought. This is the kind of drought Texas gets regularly. The Ogallala Aquifer, the massive underground reservoir beneath the high plains that irrigates a huge share of Texas agriculture, is being pumped far faster than it recharges. In some parts of the Panhandle, the water table has dropped more than 150 feet since the 1950s. Wells that once hit water at 50 feet now have to drill past 200 feet. Farmers who built their livelihoods around irrigation are watching the resource beneath their land disappear in real time, not over centuries, but over decades. And those same data centers straining the electrical grid also consume enormous quantities of water for cooling. Every megawatt of computing power needs water to keep the servers from overheating. The industries Texas is recruiting to fuel its next wave of growth are drinking from the same shrinking pool as the 30 million people already there. Texas's population is projected to grow from 29.5 million to over 51 million by 2070. That is 21 million more people in a state that already cannot reliably supply the ones it has. The State Water Board estimates $174 billion in new water infrastructure is needed, including reservoirs, pipelines, desalination plants, and aquifer recharge projects. That money has not been allocated. The plan exists on paper. The funding does not exist anywhere. The report card nobody wants to read. It is not just the grid and water. In 2025, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave Texas an overall infrastructure grade of C-, with D range grades for drinking water, wastewater, levees, and flood control. These are not abstract ratings. A D in flood control means levees that were engineered for a smaller population and milder weather are now protecting sprawling suburbs that did not exist when the levees were built. A D in wastewater means treatment plants running at or beyond capacity, struggling to process the output of cities that keep adding residents faster than they can add pipes. From 2000 to 2023, the state suffered 210 weather-related mass power outages, more than any other state in the country. Commuters in Texas's booming metro areas pay an average of $890 per year in extra costs from congestion on roads that have not kept pace with growth. Highways designed for cities of 2 million now serve cities of 5 million, and the construction never catches up because by the time a new lane opens, 50,000 more people have moved in. And Texas now has the highest uninsured rate in the nation. Roughly 16 to 17% of its population, over 5 million people, have no health insurance at all. Emergency rooms in Houston and Dallas-Fort Worth have become de facto primary care clinics for millions of residents who have no other option, stretching wait times and straining budgets. As the general manager of the Lower Colorado River Authority put it plainly, new residents do not bring their roads, water, or power with them when they come. For the first time in CNBC's history of ranking top states for business, Texas fell out of the top 5, citing the shaky grid, crumbling infrastructure, rising costs, and poor healthcare as reasons the miracle is showing cracks. Here is the core tension, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Texas's entire economic identity, the thing that draws 300,000 new residents a year, the thing governors brag about on cable news, is built on low taxes, light regulation, and minimal government. That is the brand. That is the pitch. That is the reason companies relocate and families move. But maintaining a megastate of 30 million people, heading toward 51 million, in a climate that produces hurricanes, ice storms, droughts, floods, and 110-degree heat waves requires exactly the opposite. It requires massive, coordinated public investment in pipes, wires, levees, hospitals, and roads. The kind of investment that costs tens of billions of dollars a year, every year, for decades. The Texas Miracle model works brilliantly for attracting growth. It fails catastrophically at sustaining it. Leaders cannot easily pivot because the moment Texas raises taxes or expands regulation to fund the infrastructure it desperately needs, it stops being the thing that made people move there in the first place. The low-cost, low-regulation promise is the engine, but the engine is consuming the machine it runs on. Consider what the math actually looks like. The state needs $174 billion for water alone. It needs tens of billions more for grid hardening, road expansion, flood control, and healthcare. That money has to come from somewhere: taxes, fees, bonds, or federal dollars with federal strings attached. Every one of those options contradicts the brand. That is the trap. Growth created the problem, and the brand that fuels the growth prevents the solution. Nobody knows whether this model will eventually trigger significant out-migration, people and companies leaving because of outages, water restrictions, and rising costs, or whether the economic magnetism will overpower those frustrations. The debate over connecting the grid to neighboring states, which would dramatically improve reliability but subject Texas to federal oversight, remains politically radioactive. Water researchers are still refining how climate change, aquifer depletion, and explosive municipal demand will interact across the state over the coming decades. No one has answered the fundamental question: will Texas's political leadership accept the taxes and spending increases needed to fund $170 billion plus in water projects and major upgrades to roads, levees, and the grid, or will stop? Gap fixes continue until the next Yuri-scale disaster forces the issue. Texas is not collapsing in a single dramatic moment. There is no one hurricane, no one blackout, no one headline that captures what is happening. What is happening is slower and harder to see. Recurring heat wave outages that get normalized, boil water notices that stop making the news, emergency room wait times that stretch longer each year, school funding fights that never quite get resolved, new subdivisions that break ground before anyone checks whether the water district can serve them. Each one is survivable on its own. Together, they are the sound of a system that was built for 15 million people trying to serve 30 million and heading toward 51 million without a plan to catch up. The Texas miracle is real. The growth is real. The jobs are real. So is the bill that is coming due. And right now, nobody has opened the envelope.